Thank you all so much for tuning in to Conversations That Matter. Lord knows I thought it was happening last week. If it were my world, we'd be having Conversations That Matter once a week because that's how I've been operating. But we've got some really great people here to have some wonderful conversation with, and we are going to introduce them and let them say a little bit about themselves. Let me turn this camera around. Oh, bear with me. So we have Tavia, Sillmon, and we have Alona Norwood with us this evening. And a really cool thing that they both have in common is they are both on the executive board for the NAACP, the Washington County and Johnson City chapter. Alana is the secretary, and Miss Sillmon is the president. As Chris. Yeah. But if you would like to tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to Johnson City, what you do for a living, and
Sure.
why you're here.
Great. My name is Tavia Sillmon. We moved here at the end of 2012. My husband's job transferred him. I have to always be careful how I say that because he works for the prison system. So I used to say the prison transferred him, and then people's reaction was like, oh yeah, you're admitting that? So his job transferred him, and we loved the area and the convenience of traveling so easily to different states that he retired here. So we are here to stay. We discussed it. We've got 3 adult children. Our oldest one is a practicing attorney in Alabama, and our 2 middle children are, well, my middle child and my youngest child, they're here with us here in Johnson City.
Right.
So right now I am a team leader for supported employment with Frontier Health. I've got a lot of experience in various different things, but literally this is the best job I've ever had. And I can say that with all confidence, even though I have always loved how I've been able to work with children and minister to it. I've never had a company, and I know everybody's experience is not the same, but when I went to them, I was so hurt from people in the community and the workforce, and they just loved me and took me in, and it was just a different experience. And I was like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. I should be excited to go to work. I shouldn't wake up dreading, oh my God, I got to go deal, not with the people, but with the administration.
That's no way to live.
So best job.
Frontier Mental Health?
That's at Frontier Mental Health.
Fabulous.
I work with the employment services, the supported employment team. So I absolutely love my job. It's 8 to 4:30. And we have time off for family. That was the main thing that I needed. I needed to spend time with my family because I had been working and used to working and chasing the dollar, and lost my brother in the meanwhile, and my previous job was not sympathetic at all. So that was an eye-opener for me.
I'm glad that's fabulous. Somewhere that's good and good to you.
Yeah.
Miss Norwood.
So, yeah, I'm Alona Norwood. I am going to be 23 this July. Most days I feel 53 is what I've been saying. But that's really, I'm such a busybody. I'm involved in probably too many things, but that's okay because we're making the best of it. As been noted, one of my hats is the secretary of the NAACP. I'm a new member and a new executive member. So we're learning and getting things back in order. And so it's been really fun and educational to be in this like transformative time for our chapter. And then I also, for my primary job, I am a community archivist for Black in Appalachia. And so it's a nonprofit initiative under the umbrella of East Tennessee PBS. And so we go to different rural communities via invitation from assorted people. So like librarians or like mayors, just people in the community that live there that want to see more Black history be represented and, you know, researched. So we'll go in and build relationships with these people, learn about their communities and learn about ourselves through the process. And then publish this information publicly so people can go back and reference. So a lot of it is like working on, from my experience, because I started working with Black in Appalachia during COVID. And so it was supposed to be like community events and like meeting people and like hugging old people. And like, that's great. Like, I love the elders. Like, I've always respected older folks. And so that's like a dream job, right? Like, I get to hang out with old people and listen to their stories all day.
Yeah.
Well, no, COVID destroyed that whole game plan. And so my job kind of transformed into like genealogical research. And so I was meeting these older people through Ancestry and like creating a narrative for them based off of like World War I, World War II draft cards and a marriage license, death certificates, and just like rebuilding their life based off of what is available. And so that's a really cool job. And very similar to you, I've had negative experiences in the workforce, even as like a young worker. And so to be able to go to my job and feel like supported and be able to like be my authentic self to a certain degree is so amazing. Like, I'm very thankful for my coworkers who are also very authentic, down to earth. Like, my boss gets it if I just need a day or two or three. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they are there to support me. And I think that is so important to like start to build this network of like Black and brown love and support, and still be able to get a check and pay my bills and, you know, do fun stuff for myself. So I'm really thankful, and I don't think that I could ever have a different job. Like, the bar has been set so high that I think it would be pretty impossible to find a job that like goes neck and neck with Black in Appalachia. But
well, you might create something later.
well, maybe, but yeah, I'm a very busy gal. So that's just the highlights, because there's more. We don't have to talk about all that.
You did run for Johnson City Commission.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Hard. It was a hard thing to do. So I graduated from Berea in the summer of 2020. And so I didn't think I was going to be back home. And my home previously was Elizabethton. So I didn't think I was going to end up back up in Elizabethton after graduation, and definitely not before.
Right.
And so, you know, whenever my dad was like, yeah, we live in Johnson City now, like this is our house. And I was just like, okay, everything was different. And then there was protests, you know, for George Floyd and Black Lives Matter going on. And, you know, my fellow activists and allies, they were like, hey, you know, you need to run for city commission. And so just the challenge of like trying to build relationships quickly and like gaining the trust of the community members was very challenging. And quite frankly, I did not expect to win, because I didn't have the pull in the community. Like, I didn't have the trust of the community members, and like, you have to have that. But I did get to meet a lot of cool people like Kat and Michelle and probably you as well. So, I mean, I'm building the network and you love to see it. So
you got a head start. That was awesome.
And so young, that's the great thing. You're in your 20s. You're doing this in your 20s. Most people don't do stuff like that until later in life. So I applaud you for even having the courage to do something like that, to come back home and do that. I hope that that's not your last time. I hope that you realize that sometimes you have to put yourself out there before people can get to know you. So now they have a face and a name, and they see you being an activist and what you're doing now. So I've had some people ask me about you. So.
Well, put in good words, I like to stay busy and connected. So I'm here for all the opportunities.
Yes.
So with your run for office, 2 questions. What was the most challenging, and what were you just most surprised about in a positive way? Like, wow, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Most
Okay.
challenging
Yeah. So the most challenging was definitely like having to deal with my own personal identity and kind of how I fit into the equation of being a change maker, and like being a resident of Johnson City. So touching back on like not having the relationships and not knowing people, or even really knowing what does the Johnson City Commission do. So there's a lot of days spent like just even learning like what's the job description, how do you get things done in this position, just building that general knowledge, while navigating like what is authentic to how I want to present myself as an activist and like as a Black woman that's going through the struggle, versus how do I present myself in a way that's articulate and professional and like politically correct, but still aligned with how I actually feel. And so it was hard to balance those two whenever at my age and where I grew up at, like building a healthy, positive, personal identity was very, very hard. So I didn't even really have that basis to begin with. So those things were very difficult for me. But the thing that actually got me through it and was the most rewarding and surprising aspect was the amount of community support. And so, you know, marching down the streets on State of Franklin, being surrounded by police officers, and you have like basically complete strangers like hugging you and protecting you and holding your hand and like making sure that like you're not by yourself during all of that, and sharing similar stories with people that did look like me. And came from the same area as me, it was very supportive. And I was so surprised. I just remember looking around and I was like, these people are like my family. Like I have a black family. Like I have black friends. This is pretty cool, you know? Like I've always been the black friend. And now I have other people that, you know, kind of understand. So
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's good. That's good. All right. So with you being in Frontier Mental Health, because I'm from the school system and we love you guys.
Thank you.
Love you guys in our school systems, Johnson City Schools.
Mhm.
What was a challenge for you coming? I forgot where you came from.
Alabama.
So coming from Alabama to Johnson City,
Yes.
what was that challenge in this new job? And then what was that surprise? Like, wow, I had no clue. I bet I can guess that.
The surprise was we knew coming in that we came from central Alabama, which was like 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody in school, everything was half and half. So there was,
Demographics.
and there was really, I did not experience any racism until I got to Tennessee. That's unbelievable. When I was sitting back thinking over it, it was unbelievable. We were so excited because my husband said, okay, this is the ratio for the inmates and this is the ratio of the workers. So there's not that many black people. I'm excited because I'm like, oh, well, it's going to be so easy to find a job. Everybody's going to love me because where I came from, everybody wanted diversity. Everybody wanted inclusiveness. Everybody wanted to be represented everywhere. So I was so surprised and hurt when I was so dismissed by the business world. I couldn't, it was a little depressing, to be honest, because, you know, you come expecting, okay, I'm fixing to go make some money and I'm fixing to go do this, and nobody's calling. And I'm filling out applications and I'm online and I'm busting out, filling out 30 all day, 8 hours while he's at work. And we're in a hotel because we haven't found a house. So we're in Meadowview and I'm filling out applications all day. The first place that called me, and I will never, ever say anything bad about ACT because they were the first place that called me. And I was so excited. My husband was like, and I know I still have friends that work there. He was like, oh, my wife got a job. And I was like, oh, where? And they said ACT. And they were kind of, you know, like, really? That's the call center. And, you know, they just hire anybody. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be the best me I can and just go in and do that. And that set me up for another job where I experienced a lot of microaggression and realized that I couldn't be, I love what you said, my true authentic self, because God forbid if the scary, angry Black woman came out. So I could not respond. And it looked like I was just, some stuff I couldn't let slide, but it turned into, and I still have a lot of friends at that place, but it turned into, oh, you're seeing stuff that's not there. I'm like, oh, well, you can't do that. That's showing the difference. That's racist. That statement was racist. We need to address it. They was like, Tavia, you're seeing the racism. There is no racism. And that should have been a clue for me. But the job paid pretty good. And I was willing to take that. So when I say I'm so angry at myself for allowing people to treat me that way, You have no idea of the rage that I have because I could have stopped it earlier. I could have left earlier. I could have said something earlier. And unfortunately, it wasn't going to change. So I would have had to have left earlier. That's why I'm so adamant now about diversity and inclusion and being real where you are and being accepted to who you are. Because wrong is wrong no matter where you are. I would hear things like, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. Nobody wants to work with you. Nobody likes you. Now, one thing my parents taught me was a healthy self-respect for me. So I'm like, that's not true. I mean, it just, my spirit just wouldn't accept that. I was like, that's not true. And he, you know, was kind of taken aback. And I almost, the angry black woman, I was like, that is not true. That is, yes, that is a lie. I know that's not true. So I don't know where you're getting your information from, but it's misleading about me. But you know, I'm not gonna beg you to stay here if you don't want me, and if you got to make up stuff saying people hate me, that's fine. So I left there, took some time to pray and say, okay, God, what, you know, I believe you brought me here for a reason. What is that? And just filling out applications, and my supervisor now, I really applied for a different position. And I just thank God for putting people in your life when you need them. So she called me in, and I had applied so much, y'all, to be honest. I don't know if I want her to hear this, but I couldn't remember which job it was. And I was like, oh God, I need to go look through all what I did. And she said, you applied for this job, but with your community experience and your background, I think you would be a better fit here. Do you want to try it? I was like, absolutely. And she has been the best person to work for ever. That she was able to see me in my hurt, because I was still hurt. My first words were, when she said, tell me about yourself, my first words were, my brother just died. So I'm still grieving, but that won't affect my job. And we talked about, I had a 2-hour plus interview. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, oh, I left. I was like, I'm gonna get the job, because I just overshared, didn't do anything. And it was the best place for me. I plan to just retire there. So that was the most surprising. And then being so hurt previously, and then being so loved and welcomed where I am now, it was just soothing to the soul in the workplace, which is what we need to do for the whole area.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And to hear you say that you experienced racism for the first time in Tennessee.
We
and
live,
I'm like, when I think of Alabama,
I'm scared to go.
I'm scared to go to Alabama. I ain't going.
35 miles from Birmingham, where I grew up. The Freedom Riders, 15 minutes up the road. And we didn't really talk, I didn't really know about all of that, because I was born in '66, so I really we didn't discuss a lot of racism. I had to call my mom, because when I was thinking about this, when one of the questions was, did we talk about racism? Did we talk about Black America or anything? No, because our schools, even our schools in Alabama, even though Wallace did what he did, our schools were not like that. We had a white homecoming queen, then we would have a Black one, or we had both. Or they were trying to find, the area was trying to find a happy medium for everybody. And that was in the 70s and the 80s. No problems at the schools. Because I called my mom and my parents, and they graduated from a Black school. And I was like, were there any problems before I went to school? I'm in school, and my maiden name is Baker, and there are two high school boys. They're twins, Ronald and Donald Baker. They were white. And whenever I would spend the night with my grandmother, I would ride that bus. And they were, what's your name? And they was like, oh, this is our cousin. Don't mess with her. And it's white boys. Right. So there was no racism that I experienced there. Probably could have been some, but I didn't experience it. So we didn't really talk about it. Now in school, we had Black History Month. That's the only time we really discussed it. But my parents had an international set of Negro Life. That's the name of the books. And it was 5 books, and it was literature, arts, medicine. And whenever we would do a report, it would come from that. They would like go, if I would ask them a question, if my brother and I would ask a question, we got books in there, we got encyclopedias in there, go study, go look it up. And that fostered a thirst. My big mama's house, where my grandparents lived and my great grandparents, they had that traditional picture of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. And I remember, the only pictures we had was family, and we had the white Jesus. And we had that sitting on the mantelpiece. Even when the lights stopped working, it was up there. And I remember saying, who are they and what did they do? And so I didn't realize how serious it was. And that was why when I joined the NAACP, I was because my mom was like, what made you join that? I said, because I've been living thinking everything was okay for the last several years. And it has progressively gotten worse. Because what we thought we had, we didn't. And people like me just slacked up, oh, everything's okay. We got some good jobs and some good houses, and we didn't really keep fighting or trying to push. I saw other people doing it, but I was like, okay, I'll support from afar. Yeah, it doesn't affect me until George Floyd. And I could not sleep when I saw that. And then it hit me. And my husband was like, well, did you really think that's the first time? Did you really think this is an isolated incident? And I'm like, I hadn't thought about it.
It's interesting, you're saying like from Alabama, right? Like, it's good here. Like where you're from, like this city, like it was great, and then, so for me, like growing up in Carter County, Elizabethan City, it was very much like the opposite spectrum. Like things were not okay for Black people. Like I remember in elementary school, there were 3 Black kids that were in the elementary school, and my first grade, it was 3 classes and 3 Black kids, and there was 1 Black kid in each class. Each class, there was 1 Black kid. That's how it was in first grade, whenever I first entered into the Elizabethan City school systems. And so just that memory from growing up and wondering like why the kid that I know from down the street, like why can't we ever be in the same class? Like it wasn't until middle school and high school when like the population of the schools were bigger that I even like ever had a actual class with another Black student. And to have a Black teacher, that wasn't a thing. I mean, we have 1 substitute teacher that's a Black woman in the Elizabethan City school systems, like whenever I was coming through. So it was just very predominantly white, blatant racism, microaggressions, definitely just like not feeling safe anywhere I went.
Wow.
Maybe even like feeling a little gaslit and like paranoid that like maybe it's me, right? Like how they were saying at your job, well, you're seeing the racism. And it's like, okay, so am I making this up? Like, am I reading too much into it? And so like I started having this whole identity crisis of like, am I crazy? Like, what is going on? Like, is it because I'm Black, or is it because I'm actually doing something wrong? Or like, am I just making this up? Like, why does everything have to be about race? Like, why does it always come back to like, is it because I'm Black? And the reality of the situation is we have not tended the wounds of slavery, of how this country ever even started. And so like in high school and like as a kid, I couldn't really understand like, why is it always coming back to slavery and why is it always about race? And it's because we still haven't addressed the problem, like the root of it. And so all of these things that we see happening, like, you're not able to get a job here. ACT is like seen as like this horrible company and they'll just hire anybody, but they're hiring people that have nonviolent felonies and they're hiring people that have different sounding names like Tavia and Alana. And they'll hire you if you don't have a college education. Like whenever I graduated from college, I was looking for all these jobs and stuff, and it was like $13 an hour, master's degree required. And I'm like, okay, first of all, $13 an hour isn't going to help me pay for my student loan from undergrad.
Right.
Because if you're not getting your master's degree paid for, you're doing it wrong. That's just a little tip there, y'all. But
Listen.
I don't have a master's degree, but that's what they've been telling me in the programs is like, don't pay for master's degree, basically. But all of that to say, it's just like, it's been such a different experience. And like recently, you know, now that I do have more of a sense of self and I'm able to be like, well, that's a microaggression.
Right.
And like, why did you say that? Like, you know, instead of it coming off as like attacking or like that angry Black woman, it's more of like, this is a safe space and I'm not angry with you, because I used to say crazy stuff like that all the time. Like I would be microaggressive to myself, like internalized racism, because that's all I've ever heard. That's all I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's perpetuated not just inside the town and the city, but you watch movies and watch the news and read books, and it just continues to like burrow those ideas into your head, and it just becomes who you are, and this is just what we do. But now that I'm able to have these like safe space conversations and like kind of make people more vulnerable, kind of call them out, they start to understand like through their own answers, like, ooh, that was a contradiction, and like that actually doesn't make sense. And like, I know I said I believe this one thing, but like really that's not how I live my life, and like that's not really what I believe, and that's not the action that I'm putting behind things. So like it makes you like take a step back and reevaluate, and that's a really hard skill to do. And I think that the only way you're going to be able to have those types of conversations is if you start within yourself and start to be like, okay, I need to break down my own biases and break down that own internalized racism, and be gentle with yourself. Like you made a comment of like, I was so angry at myself, right?
Yes.
And I get that. I've been the angry Black kid, the angry Black teenager, and now probably an angry Black woman for all 23 years of my life. My mother said I came into this world with an attitude. So,
but that's not a negative thing.
So I've like had to learn to like be gentle with myself and be forgiving and be like, okay, like some of the things that I've just kind of let slide,
no more,
or you know, or I just put up with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I realize now that I put myself in like that hush hush predicament because it was a means of survival.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't just go into that job and be like, we're having a walkout. Come on, we're unionizing. They're gonna fire you so quick, and then where are you gonna be?
Right.
Back at the hotel, unemployed, just like square one, you know?
Yes.
And so it's hard to find that balance of like, okay, I need to stay safe and protect myself survive, versus I'm trying to thrive and like do good. And so like, how do you find that balance? And so it's hard and it's complicated. So I just tell people to be gentle with themselves, and it's so hard to do that.
You know, you said something that struck me, and I just want to share how important, and this is not necessarily about overt racism, but you know, when I told you I hadn't experienced anything, when I was in first grade, this is just how important Black teachers are. If anybody's in the school system, it is so important that you have Black teachers in your life. My first grade teacher was white. I had allergies really, really bad, and back then all they could give you was Benadryl. So if I took a Benadryl in the morning, I'm passed out. So I'm looking like I've got some issues. My eyes are watering, I'm sneezing. If I don't take it, I'm sneezing and coughing and snotting. But if I take it, I'm asleep. There was another Black teacher. There was another first grade teacher. She was Black. Her name was Miss Wynn. She went to my mother and said, every time I look in that room, Tavia is grading papers. Go to the school and tell them you want her in my room. And I will challenge her. Because I was reading before I went to school.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, she's great. She's doing the teacher's work. Why didn't the teacher give me more? Why didn't she, if I'm grading the papers and grading them right in the first grade, why didn't she, hey, Miss Baker, we need to do this for Tavia. We need to do, she didn't do that. So they moved me to that room, and it changed the course of my life because I couldn't take my Benadryl. I couldn't take but half of it. Because I needed to be focused and I needed to be, and we had to kind of adapt. And then when I would go home, I would take the other one. And I was so glad that when my children came and allergies, that we didn't have to take Benadryl. They had other stuff that you could take and you would be awake. But that's just how important. I wasn't even in her class. I was another Black student that she saw wasn't being challenged. That's why you need to see Black teachers. And sometimes I was like, man, I should have been a teacher. And then, you know, I always say that because, you know, when you're used to being the only one,
Yeah.
you see these gaps and you want to do that. If I can encourage people to be just her presence there. And then we had one for every grade. See, we had a first grade teacher and a second grade teacher, Black, and then the third grade teacher, then a fourth grade teacher, then a fourth and fifth grade teacher, and then the fifth grade. I mean,
I wish I could have been that
grade.
lucky. That sounds, it wasn't like that until probably college. And even then it was still kind of like, okay, well, there's only maybe one professor in a department and like you kind of are pinning to get them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was
So-
in Kentucky.
Yeah, that was in Kentucky. Yeah, Berea, Kentucky, like Eastern. And so the experience of Berea College is particularly different.
Isn't it
Because so it's a private liberal arts school, which I mean,
Okay.
that makes it different in and of itself, right? And so coming from like Johnson City, that's a state university, you know, so I mean, there's only so much that the school can do, whereas Berea can kind of get away with more radical liberal stances because they're getting a lot of private funding. But the history of Berea, in short, is it was the first interracial college in the South.
Okay.
And so it was founded in 1855, and it was founded by an abolitionist and a former slave owner and reverend. And so through his, you know, upbringing and watching his father, who was also a pastor, have slaves, and then continue on studying Christianity, he was like, this just doesn't work. Like, how can you own people and say that, like, I'm a good God-fearing Christian, like, whenever you physically own people as property?
Right.
And so he was like, it is my personal life's dedication to like build a school where I can see Black and white people 50-50, literally 1-to-1,
Yeah.
have a world-class quality education.
Great.
And so that type of like radical understanding of like, you know, we're all one and the same, like my liberation and my survival is intertwined with your liberation, with your survival. So
Right.
like if you're not okay and you're not doing good, like how am I going to be okay, right? And so being able to go to school with like these underlying tones of like, go fuck shit up, like go be crazy, like let's go, like burn it down and rebuild it, like, but not here, like go somewhere else over there and burn it down and rebuild it, but like we support you, like this is what we need. It's like critical thinking. It's not working.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, if something is not working, you have to start over, like you have to fix it
Yeah.
at the core.
Right.
And so I was very thankful to be from a college that was like, let me take your brain out and put it on the table and you can get a good look at it, right? It's so beautiful, memorize it, and I'm going to smash it. And for the next 2 years, it is your personal task to put it back together and make it work again. And that's kind of how I describe critical thinking. And so I think we need to have more critical thinking styles of teaching and educating in the
Yeah.
schools, because whenever I learned Black history in February, because that's all it ever was
Right.
in February,
Right.
there was never any room for, well, this doesn't make sense. And well, wasn't there another person that did this before Rosa Parks? Like, was she really the first person to say no? Like, where's the depth of it?
Right.
Like, there's more than just these 3 people,
Yes.
MLK, Rosa Parks, and they may talk about Malcolm X, but
In a
very
negative
demonized,
manner.
very
Yes.
demonized,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that was it. Oh, and well, there were slaves, but they, you know, they were pretty happy. Like, you know, they were fed and it wasn't so bad, right?
Yeah.
And you couldn't challenge it. You'd be,
Yeah.
you know, well, you're insubordinate, and if you keep this up, you're going to get detention, and that doesn't look good on you. And I was very like, from the time I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to college. I'm getting out of here. Like, I'm never looking back. Like, that was the motto at like 5. Okay. Like, college, this is a thing.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, well, I got to shut up. You know, like, I can't be talking about this. I can't get detentions. I'm not going to be able to participate and won't get into college. So it was like this whirlwind effect. Right.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you see now, like, and I want to encourage people to go be teachers and like minorities go educate, but like in the state of Tennessee, good luck being a Black person or a person of color and like having to teach about the civil rights movement or, you know, mass incarceration or the Reagan administration, whenever you see the emergence of things like the super predator, Nixon with the war on drugs. I mean, that's all systematic racism and oppression. And with recent legislation that's being pushed in the state of Tennessee, you can't say words like systematic racism, and you can't even make strokes about it without even like saying the actual buzzword. So it's like, how would I really make a difference as a Black educator if I'm not even allowed to talk about the real history and the real implications of what's going on in 2021 in very parallel fashion of what was going on in the 1800s during slavery? Like,
but the alternative would be what has been happening. People leave, they come, they get their education, and then they go other places. We've got to get to a point where the community and other people, even the people in charge, have got to say, hey, this has got to change. This is not, this is Tennessee. We've got to change it. There are people here in Tennessee that matter. And if you don't realize what a disservice you're doing to them when you're only teaching half truths. Mm-hmm. And they grow up thinking that that's the gospel. Mm-hmm. It's so many times I've heard that this is my heritage. You're trying to take away my heritage. Mm-hmm. And you don't really understand that your heritage was hateful and hurtful, and it killed me. And it was about you being on top and me being on the bottom, and you taking advantage of me and you not wanting to see me grow. That's what you're proud of? That's your heritage? Mm-hmm. Let me share with you what your heritage is from my view. And if we've got to change that. You're right. I know people. When I first moved here, and I was talking to Michelle, and I was like, there was a meeting of women of color, I think. Mm-hmm. And there was a young lady in there, and she was moving to Charlotte, and that was her only time that she could attend the meeting. And she said, I have applied for every school here, and I got a job in Charlotte. I didn't realize that now when you look at the school almanac and you look at the books, there are no Black teachers unless they are substitute teachers. My husband works for the school system after he retired, because football is his first love. I told him he went back to that. and he's a support person. Mm-hmm. And they will hire us as support people. Mm-hmm. But they don't want us to be the teacher. That's got to change. And I've talked to some school systems that have said, we want to change that. We know that's not right. We want to change that. But now the problem is what you just said. Nobody believes
They're
it.
changing the rules.
Yeah, nobody wants to, I don't believe you.
They won't even let them talk about, the protests were going on last summer and everything that's been going on in the last year and a half. I've got friends that are teachers in Greene County, and they sent out a memo to all of their teachers saying that you are not allowed to use, anything that's a current event that could possibly contradict the students' upbringing at home, or something that compromises what they've been taught at home. So basically, don't talk about anything that's going on. And to create I think some of the phrases to create some type of divisiveness in the class. Yeah. So. In my understanding of that, which I do need to read more on that law, if someone says, I'm not a history buff, but if someone makes a comment that really shows the white population as being supreme, or they have done something that is so wonderful,
But then you also throw in, but wait a minute, what about this, how you hurt me in my heritage?
Right.
That creates a split in the classroom, so you can't say that.
Hmm.
Anything that's going to be divisive, you can't say that. That is my understanding.
Is that a law?
It was House bill and then SB, so that's Senate, so it passed the House and the Senate.
It's moving its way through it.
So-
It's not cancel culture, it's race culture.
Critical race theory.
Yeah, critical race theory.
And I got some kind of article, before I call it crazy, I need to read it.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be crazy because of who sent it to me. But I just need to look at that and see.
Yeah.
But that is what it basically says. It's just crazy.
And then on top of that, it's like, okay, so I can get in trouble, like whatever. Okay, I'll take the demerit, right? I'll take the demotion or whatever. Like if this is really important enough to me, like I need to set these kids straight. All right, cool. But then to double whammy it, it's not just a personal implication if you break the rules. It's, oh, now your school, like your whole school may lose its funding. Right. And so that's just like a double whammy. Like, how are you dangling the dollars? Like it's insurance. Yeah. To make sure that they are not going to talk about it.
That's why it's so important that we vote and put in people
November
who
8th.
care about our
2022,
concerns.
Governor Bill Lee is up for re-election in 2022. He has got to go. Sir, I'm coming for your
surprised.
job.
I'm surprised. I can't believe, I'd sit and watch those meetings and things, and we're lucky in Jonesboro, we have 2 representatives on the historic commission for the state. And so the whole removal of the Nathan Bedford Forest Bus, I was asked to assist in doing some research to help get to the point of the matter of finding a very cut and dry argument of why it needs to go. It can't be, don't make it subjective,
Right.
completely objective. Why does it need to go? How did it get there? Get it
Yeah.
out. So I got on Facebook, started a little group with like 10 people. We did some research, figured it out, and it got approved, or it was voted out to go. And Bill Lee was for getting it out. Now that they voted and it's supposed to be getting gone to the museum where it belongs.
Right.
Now they have some emergent task force to reevaluate, and they want to purge the Tennessee Historic Commission of its
Completely?
members
Yeah.
and redo. They want to redo of all of it because they were so shocked that they voted to remove it. And so it's just like, I don't even understand. Well, I do understand. I'm not naive, but it's just truly confusing and disgusting and just, heart shattering that these people are up there making the decisions that are going to trickle down and affect us and everyone.
Yeah.
But just the
Not
majority,
looking at
they don't even care, and it's just blatant. And
Yeah.
they'll just say crazy sideways stuff, and you're just like, holy cow. Remember that, I'm screenshotting left and right, and I'm, grassroots, let's get some billboards and put up the stupid tweets they put out. Like, let's not let people forget what they've been doing,
Right.
because it's all smiles and kissing babies when it comes re-election time.
Yeah.
But what were you really up to?
Yeah. And what did you vote for? And how did you make change that's going to affect me negatively,
Mhm.
intentionally?
Mhm.
The good old boy system is really into play
Mhm.
in Tennessee.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there are good old boy systems a lot of places,
Mhm.
but in Tennessee, being a right to work state, it is so prevalent here. And it's like it's intentional. And it's like it's blatant, and it's like, we don't care if you know or not. Before they would kind of hide that, and like you said, they would, in front of folks, act one way, which is why we have a mass exodus of our youth in the church,
Mhm.
because they have seen their parents act one way at home and say one thing at home and act another way in front of people. But that's how the good old boy system used to be. And now they're out in public, in front with their money and their racist views,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and they want things done. That's why you have to have your own wealth. You have to create your own wealth. And that is why you have to put people in position that have your best interest at heart.
That's why I think that we need more people of color, more minorities, more folks who are just busy working, just trying to do what they do.
Yeah.
To open their eyes a little wider and realize what's really going on in front of you. Take a few minutes and open your eyes, get a little more education under what's happening.
Yeah.
And vote.
Yes.
And voice. And just I when I first retired, I asked myself, where are the Black people? I was here forever, and I'm like, where are the Black folks?
Yeah.
Because I didn't see them out and about and things, and I did. I'm like, okay, and I think Black folks are coming out, but I still want more people because we have a voice.
Yes.
We've got a voice and we've got power. We just have to use it.
Yeah.
Just have to use it
Look
and
at
not
Georgia.
assume that exactly. Look at Georgia. My goodness.
And what baffles me is Tennessee is so long. One side, I mean,
It's completely.
It's like
see, we're in the tip, we're in the hollers and the valleys and the mountains, right? And then once you hit that time change, it starts to shift. I mean, you're literally in a whole different world at that point.
You really
so,
are.
I mean, just the cultural differences in a state is astounding. And then you think about, okay, you see the cultural difference so stark in a state like Tennessee, and then think about how the country is so different by region, right? And what's regionally acceptable in this regional culture. So what is the culture of the United States? You know, it's supposed to be some type of like melting pot, but if you even want to look at that analogy, how does that even work? You know, because if you're melting and blending or assimilating, then you're losing all the good parts that make you who you are, right? And so in one of my communication classes, I was a Black lady that was teaching it from Texas. Love Dr. Brown, Dr. Kanaya Brown. If you see me, shout out. Love you, girl. You the one. You the truth. But we kind of switched this analogy, and you know, it doesn't really seem that big of a deal, but like the melting pot, I mean, everybody knows what that is. That's like the culture of America. Instead, no, it kind of is though. You assimilate to survive. Like you lose your accent, you code switch, you silk press your hair if it's kinky curls, like you do all those things, right? It should instead be a stew, like a stew. So you have your meat and your potatoes and your carrots and your basil leaf, like your bay leaves. I mean, you got all the stuff.
I like that.
And it holds it's like the content of who it is at a core, but it all kind of comes together. It makes this delicious with every bite. It's a little bit different. Like you get a taste for the flavor.
Everything holds its own.
Exactly.
I've heard it as a salad.
Yeah, as a salad, a garden, yeah.
It's got its own, but it's still one nice dish.
Yeah. And so I think just even using terminology like that and being just a little bit more aware of like, what, like you were saying, Michelle, like what's really going on? Yeah. Like what are these undertones of what it means to survive and live in certain parts of the country or certain parts of your state or and depending on how big your city is, what does it look like to survive within your own block? You know, if you like Louisville, I spent a couple of breaks in college up in Louisville, and I mean, it was literally like you don't wear a certain color to go to this block, and like I literally thought it was a game. I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you because I packed everything blue, and I don't own anything red. I don't know what to tell you. This is what I'm wearing, and my friend was like, "You're not wearing those clothes. Like you have to pick something else. Like it's not a game." Wow. It may not happen because I'm probably not going to be taking you that very far from my house. Like there are a couple of blocks that we chill and shop and do all of the things. And outside of that, like you just have to watch your back and be safe. Yeah. And so to even have to like survive and navigate block to block, like it's.
And see, I wouldn't know how to survive in that.
I know how to survive in the sticks, right? It's like, okay, I'm seeing more Confederate flags. We got more like one way in, one way out. Let me go ahead and turn around. I'm losing phone signal. Like, okay, hey, I just passed mile marker, whatever. Like, I'm still gonna go, but just know, like, if you don't see me tomorrow, you need to come up Stony Creek and come looking for me.
Exactly.
So, I mean,
Don't go to Stony Creek.
Listen, let's not talk about
hey, we love the Blue Hole and the Watauga Lake and all that good
you
stuff,
don't go
but
by
just
yourself,
no.
and you have to be safe.
I mean, even in, Irwin, I mean, that's just a few miles down the road. I mean, historically, they're known as a sundown town. So that means if you're Black, you do not want to be caught out after the sun goes down.
You know, I had somebody tell me that.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, when did you hear that growing up? Don't go this way, don't go that way.
It was just, I mean, it's just
This is
common.
like your
Yeah, I mean,
ABCs,
it's
1, 2,
just
3,
ABCs
don't
1, 2, 3, and
go
then
country.
like you don't go certain places. This is how you conduct yourself. These are the kind of things that you would be saying. You dress this way. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Even though I didn't do that, but I was like, I'm respectful enough. I'm not going to cause any. Don't cause problems. Don't rock the boat. Make sure you have your ID on you. As soon as I got my permit, my dad was like, "Where's your ID?" Right? Like he would just be like, "I need to see your ID." Like, and if I didn't have it, like that was a problem, because he was like, "Listen, if the police want to, they will stop you while you're walking or on your bike or doing just minding your own business. Stop and frisk you. You don't have an ID. You look like a grown woman. Why don't you have your identification?" It could be, okay, well, we'll let you off this time. That's cool. A fine or jail. Like it could be that serious, right? And like all my friends were like, "Oh, I don't have my wallet. What's the big deal?" I'm like, "How could you leave your ID? Like, what do you mean?" And it's like such a huge deal. Or, I get pulled over and I'm like, hands on the steering wheel, like, don't, like, okay, I'm going to reach for this. Like I'm getting, and it's very like, it's scary and anxious and nobody should have to live like that. And then whenever you try to explain your situation and what you've been going through, or you find yourself like suffering from depression or anxiety or any of the various sorts of mental illness, it's all, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting like that? Like it hasn't been that bad. And it's like,
You'll be fine. You're
I'm
strong.
tired.
I'm tired. I've been broken down and you guys just keep beating me, expecting me to get back up and be okay.
Yeah.
And the saying, like, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far.
true.
I mean, it's so toxic and detrimental, but it's the truth.
It's true.
It is.
It unfortunately is true. And when you were saying that, I was just thinking about when I was growing up, that conversation that we had was be safe, don't stop. If anybody pulls you over, you go to a light. It wasn't necessarily race when I was in high school, but I was racially profiled, not in my home city, but when I was driving. And the first time my children were all little, and we were coming from, I'm a cheerleader sponsor. We're coming from a little league game. And I have just bought a old model car. I love old cars. And evidently the paint is not the color that it was supposed to be. It was like an off-white, but it was supposed to be some other color. And the air wasn't working, but it was my new old car. So I drove it to the game. And they were in the back and it was foggy in there. It was because the air wasn't working. And I got pulled over. Now I'm going 40 because I already can't see. And I'm like, "Why did you stop me?" And it was another city. And he was like, "Ma'am, I see your light." And I'm like, "Yes, my cousin's in the seat beside me. Why did you stop me?" Well, the paint on the registration, it says one color, but it's another. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. You go ahead and go on. And I was like, "No, you pulled me." I was belligerent. "You pulled me over for a reason, and I want to know why." "Ma'am, go ahead, go on." So I left and I looked at him. I was like, "Were we just profiled? Did they think we were smoking because it was foggy in there?" That's what he thought. And then I'm going to work, another old car. My car had messed up, so I'm driving my parents' old Buick. Paint off of it. My hair is shaved like now, but it wasn't blonde. And I was speeding, coming off a hill. And state trooper stopped me. And when the state trooper stopped me, he gets out with his hand on his gun. So I'm reaching over to get I'm a grown woman, an adult now. I reach over to get my thing and I see him coming up, creeping with his gun. And I'm like, "Wait a minute.
No sudden movements.
Wait a minute. Ma'am, can I see yes. Why did you stop me? Did you know that this was a 55? I said, "I think this is a speed trap, but I was coming down the hill and so he wrote me a ticket." Because my mom worked at the police station and I was very comfortable. She was the head dispatcher. So I was comfortable with the Lincoln City Police and some other states. So it was, I went to school with some of them. So to be afraid of them was unfathomable. I know these people. We hung out. So that was, when I went to court, because I was like, "That's not right. I didn't see a sign saying that." I get to court. The judge, and I'm telling the judge, I was stopped on this part of the interstate on I-20, and he said, "Who was the officer?" And I told him the officer's name because I remembered it. He looked at the bailiff, and then he looked at me and said, "Case dismissed." And I didn't even get to argue because that guy was known to profile people.
So my thing is, right, like, if you have a situation like this,
Mhm.
and you know, like, the judge knows,
Yes.
the keeper of the law, the maintainer of order, like, knows that this is a bad apple, like, he's not a good cop, like, he probably shouldn't be working. The bailiff knows. Surely the police department in that city knows that he's not, like, how are you allowed to keep your
Because
job?
it was money.
There's,
Because
there
it
has
was
to
money.
be some type of accountability that's
It
like
does.
doesn't come into play with, like, oh, well, dollars. You know, you see accountability for these teachers of, well, if you start popping off and start saying, you know, these buzzwords like white privilege or white guilt, like, no more license to teach and no more funding for your school.
Yeah.
So what's the accountability if they are able, if lawmakers are able to go that hard on teachers that are educating our future leaders, our children, our babies, then why are they not going that hard on police officers that are killing our children and our babies and the people that make the babies?
Teaching young people, correcting. I think if every black kid in the 4th grade knew the real story,
Yeah.
all black kids would be a completely different person. And in 20 years, look at who's walking Tennessee.
Yes.
And I think if you are teaching this young folks, this generation, the real truth.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say that so far it's been fake, but it's not the full truth.
Right.
You can talk all you want about slavery, but descendants of slaves did not come from slaves. They came from kings and queens of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Tell that part of the story.
Exactly.
Tell
Exactly.
us that one. I that's my passion. And then as I talk, the angry black woman comes out.
Yeah.
But
Scorn.
oh my gosh. But I think if you start teaching these little generations now, middle school, elementary, high school, 20 years, you got a whole generation of people who know the full story.
That's right.
And they're not going to support the stories that are being told now.
Well,
That's my rendition.
You're right.
School programs, you know, the Langston Center,
Yes.
McKinney Center,
Yes.
any kind of cultural center, like, it sucks, but it's falling to us now, the community
Parents,
members, to have to
communities.
be like, if you want your child to learn the real history.
You
guess
know what it's
We're gonna
falling
have
to?
supplement.
Every family needs that little black.
Yes,
encyclopedia.
I wish that's what I was thinking. I was like, I wish I had that.
I was telling
I was
my
in the public library, you know, and
You don't even know.
nothing good is in there, but that would have been so nice just to have like a black,
oh man,
you know, reference.
it was awesome because every book report was on somebody from those books. And when I was talking to my mom and dad, I was like, I think I need to get that and bring it up because it was so informative. And you are right. When we really know who we are, black kids and white kids, the whole face of the nation will change. And right now, everybody's operating in fear. And they are trying to keep the truth from coming out because when it hits, and you can't stop the truth. I mean, all you can do is prolong it. So it's going to happen. And we're in the process of it happening. Even though we have these little setbacks that we see, we still have progress in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
When it happens, it is going to be a big explosion and it is going to change the face and people are going to understand their purpose. And life as they knew it will change. For the better, though, this is the thing, it will be better.
Absolutely.
But nobody wants to.
I think every individual will go through that. I took a class this past summer with Adam Dixon on Black history.
Mm-hmm.
I will be 61 this year. That was my first Black history class in my whole life. I should do sassy hands. And I'm like, why did I have to be 60 years old
Yeah.
to learn about my history?
Yeah.
Every day that I went to that class, I cried. Every day.
I
'Cause
believe it.
if I had known this when I was in the 4th grade, I think in the 4th grade, now let's talk about slavery. And I was that one single black kid in the class and every pair of white eyeballs. Exactly.
And
Right
it's
at
like,
you. Like,
I don't know.
are you from slaves? Was your mama a slave? Was your granny a slave? And all I could say was, I don't know. But if I could say, no, my ancestors were kings and queens, now
Right.
kiss my butt.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's interesting to
Yeah,
point out, you know, that like it's not just by chance or by choice or lack of the information being in the textbooks. Like, it was very intentional from the
Yes.
very beginning
Yes.
not to keep records.
Yes.
Not to worry about what this person's name is or any of that. It was,
And just change
this
it.
is the amount of bodies that we have. Like, this is
Right.
the amount of cargo that we have on this ship. How many, like, bodies or cargo didn't make it, and this is how many we put here and there, and like it didn't matter what your name was. Whoever bought you is the name that you
Right.
took on
Right.
because it was easier for them to remember and
While
keep
you
track
die,
of.
then you're real now.
And so then, you know, it's like, okay, the job that I do, Black in Appalachia, it's very genealogical based, right? So there's only so far that I can even go back
Right.
because the records just do not exist. They're just, it's just not there.
Posthumous death or birth certificates. When I was doing the ancestry, my grandfather on my dad's side, my black side, he just passed away recently, and so it kick-started me doing the research again on both sides. And I'm finding just tons and tons, you know, they were field workers in South Carolina,
Mhm.
and it's just generation after generation after generation of field worker, and I'm like, well, obviously
We
Jesus
know what
said
that
it
is,
for sure.
yeah.
And then, you know, someone's death certificate said that they were shot point blank in the head, and I'm like, well, what
Wow.
happened there, I wonder, you know? And that was in like the early 1900s, late 1800s, and I'm just like, oh, that, you know, I cried when I saw that. I was just like,
Yeah.
somebody got murdered, cool. But seeing these certificates, and it's like they aren't happening until after they've died, and then there's just so much that can be learned from all that, that all of the health issues and stuff, it's all just the same, that, you know, high blood pressure, cardiovascular issues. If we
Straight
are,
out of the diet. You
Yeah.
get the
We know
trash
why
that wants
now.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We now know why we have those generational curses.
Yeah, and it's
We
wild to me
understand it.
because, you know, Michelle was saying like our way back ancestors were literally royalty, right? Like they were kings and queens, and we only have access to
After.
field workers
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
slaves and mistreatment and stuff like that versus what was the tribe that you came
Right.
from, and like what was the native tongue and the language.
What
and,
part?
yeah, even what part of Africa,
Well,
because let's address that. Like Africa is Africa.
Right.
There's not West Africa, South
Right.
Africa, individual names of countries. Like, no, it's just Africa.
Do your Ancestry DNA. I did mine. Of course, there are mysteries in there for me,
Yeah.
but
There's-
I know Ghana, and I know there are different countries of Africa that
Sierra Leone.
I have that in my blood. And I can easily go back and look at who are those people.
Now my brother did his.
It's amazing.
And he had we have a lot of Indian, and it was surprising that it wasn't as much Indian, but he had a lot of Pacific Asian. And I'm like, that's Indian. But you know, that's
Well, you're talking Native American Indians?
Like
Yes.
indigenous.
And
Okay.
I've heard that Native American Indians refuse to give their DNA. That's probably
I
how
don't
scared
blame
white
them.
people, so I'm not gonna do it.
Probably.
And so there's not a
No
lot of
trust.
DNA tests.
yes, and that's why he said there wasn't a gauge to
That's-
measure. So it said Pacific Asian.
Uh-huh.
But he did have Cameroon
Right, that's part of mine.
on his, and I need to ask my mom to get that. I need to do mine because
It is worth the spinning in the tube, guys. It is worth it.
Yeah.
It is really worth it. I mean, it's a whole nother thing.
we tried to do our ancestry when it was time for our kids to go to college, because we were going to use the Indian part to try to go to school. But if
Hey, you
you're
gotta
not
get it how you live, okay?
but if you're
Shoot.
not part of a tribe, or you're not, it's not documented.
Yeah.
And even though they had the Indian names, you had one drop of blood,
My God.
you were African American,
Mhm.
and the trail kind of stops there.
Yeah, being like biracial, like that one drop, I mean, that's basically been who I am, you know, like there's never any like,
Isn't that interesting?
so, and for me, it's so bizarre because like, it's not like removed, right? It's like my maternal grandmother is so white. She is literally allergic to the sun. Like she is white. Like I wish it was a joke, but I mean, literally she is very Caucasian. Okay. And that's like a whole line of my family.
Right.
Like my aunt that we share a birthday, like she is white. And my mom grew up very light-skinned, you know, but she had a big afro. Her family didn't know how to, you know, do anything with how she presented as this black person. And she didn't have any connection to her black family. And so my dad is biracial as well.
Okay.
And so my grandfather was like white passing, even though he technically had a little something in there. I mean, he was white passing enough to get a loan for a house as a white man. And because he put in loans as a black person and kept getting denied. So he was like, I have the money, I have the credit, I got the land, like I need to look. And so it's people are like, I remember I got in this argument with somebody and I was like, I remember whenever I was in 4th grade. Why is 4th grade so like
it's critical.
impactful?
It's critical.
I was in 4th grade and I remember my cousin, her mother is a white lady, and that's who she was predominantly raised by, was her white mother. And I was raised by my black presenting biracial mom. And so on her TCAP test, the standardized testing here in Tennessee, it marked her race as white. And on my booklet, it said black. And so I was like, okay, well, I mean, my grandmama's white, you know, like, I'm gonna just mark in white too. Like I'm both black and white.
Yeah.
And and that started on a Monday and you take it all week. Okay. You get the same booklet back. And that first little personal information pamphlet, like that don't change. Right.
Right.
So I'm scribbling it out and remarking it. And they keep on like, you know, we go through this whole process and I'm like, I am both. Like, why is this not a
Did
thing?
they really change
They
it?
really changed it. They
In the school system.
The teacher that administrated the test, like whoever my like homeroom, like my main teacher was, they would give us our booklets out every day, right? And they'd be like, make sure, go through and make sure everything's correct. And then we're gonna start our test now. And I'd be like, well, you changed it, so I gotta put by the time Friday rolled around, there was a hole in the white part of like the race.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, if it's not marked now, I guess it's not going to be marked. I mean, there's a hole in it. So are you guys going to count that?
My teacher literally came and asked me, well, what race is your father? Because I was like, my mom's white and my dad's black. And she was like, well, then you need to mark black. And I was like, well, what about my mom? Because I was marking other, or I was marking black and white too. And they were like, well, you're a mulatto, and that's not a
geez.
like,
They actually told you.
Not mulatto.
Yeah. And I was just like so confused. And my dad taught art, so I came home and he was like, honey, you're burnt sienna and peach. It was crazy. He was like a light shade of both. And so identity crisis, when I was your age, Alana, I didn't even know who I was, what I was, you know, been all kinds of just mistreatment and stuff, and not knowing.
Not even realizing, half the time not even knowing, like, this is a problem. Like, you don't even know.
So that's a question that I wanted to ask you. I didn't know how. I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, we need to get to what questions you have for each other.
Okay, this is the one that I have for her. Was growing up biracial harder or more difficult than choosing? And I know my question kind of changed because I already imagine that it's difficult. And you obviously identify as black, but still understand that you are half white, part white. And I remember I got mad at Tiger Woods because he was like, but I'm not black. I think it was the way he said it. And he was really saying, I want to acknowledge my mom, which is all, well and good. He was supposed to. That's what he was supposed to do. But I was like, what does he mean he's not black? Yes, he is. But because we've been conditioned to accept that too. How has that made you who you are today? Because we've talked about how difficult it was in school and not knowing who you are for anybody.
I think for me, having to balance between like being white and being black and then being like pretty equal, like not being really more one or the other, and having to kind of like make this conscious choice. What would people say if I walked into a room and was like, hi, I'm Alona Norwood and I identify as a white woman? They'd be like, what in the world is it? She done lost it, right? Like no credibility, none of that. Like I'm just out there. So there's that one point of like, okay, well, nobody would even buy the fact that like, oh yeah, I'm white, right? And so that was one thing, just the obvious. But then another part was like, okay, so, but I am part white, you know, so how do I accept this about me? Because no offense, white people, y'all be doing some trifling stuff. Your ancestors do not have a good track record, and y'all are kind of following suit. And that was a generalization. I understand that, but child, these white people be tripping, and I'm part white, so I'm like, how do I
say that?
How do these two identities that make me who I am, that completely go like this, oil and water, so to speak? How do I make this into who I am?
Yeah.
And so honestly, I take what I need and I leave the rest, because there are amazing qualities of my family and there are great accomplishments by white people. And there's also amazing things on my black side and amazing accomplishments by black people. So I just take a little bit of both and make it my own. So like some days I'm like, well, all days I'm like Black Lives Matter, and I'll be wearing like a fist or like African gear, or like whatever it is, right? Like I embrace that. Like I love Southern cooking and like, you know, all of these things. But then on the flip side, I might be at a Black Lives Matter protest, true story, wearing a Grateful Dead tie-dye t-shirt and Birkenstocks and listening to Jimi Hendrix and Pink Floyd. I mean, so I like to go mudding and fishing, and my uncle owns horses. Like I'm very much like this Southern, like white type of personality, but then I have curly hair and dark skin and wide hips, and I love Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion, and you know, so there's like these black things that come out, and that's okay. I celebrate my birthday for a month, and apparently that's an African tradition, and I did not know that until college. Yes, in some African tribes, they celebrate their birthdays and weddings for extended periods of time, like weeks to a month, right? And my whole life, I've always done that. Maybe it's because I'm a Leo, maybe it's because I'm a little self-absorbed, or maybe it's epigenetics, and that's celebratory, like we are important and this matters, like let's turn up. That's in me somewhere way back in there.
It's coming out.
Right.
I'm a Leo, and I have for years, even before my DNA, for years celebrate. You get 30 days for your birthday.
Yeah, all month.
I mean,
I did that this year.
Yeah, so that's a black thing apparently, and I didn't know that until I was hanging out with or I was nearby at a lunch table, and there was a group of Nigerian international students, and it was one of their birthdays, and I was like, they've been celebrating. It's that boy's birthday again. Like what? Time out. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Like when's your actual birthday? Because I think I know what you're doing here. And he was like, oh, my birthday ain't until the end of the month. And I was like, oh great, I do the same thing. Like he was like, yeah, this is like a tradition in my community. And I was like, wow, so I am black after all. That's cool.
You felt validated.
Yeah.
oh my goodness.
But my question for you was, you know, you're a pastor, right? Or a preacher?
Yeah.
Okay. So you are a woman of the church and things like that. And so
Yeah.
I was just wondering, how does your faith and your like Christian background and like being a leader in the church, like how does that coincide or kind of differ from like your activism and, you know, working in the NAACP and just like serving all these roles that are very like pro-black and like activist based?
Since you asked, if I can go spiritual for a moment, during the George Floyd trials, and I'll speed this up because I know I'm long-winded. That's not the preacher in me though, that's just me. I was so hurt and lost and angry with myself again that I didn't see this coming and hadn't done anything before now. And was asking God every night when I'm waking up, what do I need to do? What can I do to make a change, to be different, and or to make things better? And he had told me to, I lie to you not, I heard NAACP, and I was already a member, and I was like, no, because, and I love God because he lets me be me. He lets me have my little tantrums and do my little thing, and I'm like, I don't have time for that, God. We've talked about that. And I've already done my stuff like that. So I've done my stuff with the community, and I'm busy as a youth minister at the church, and I don't have time for this. Even though it was COVID and we weren't doing a lot at the church, And I couldn't rest. I couldn't rest. And he was like, you need to run for president. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. Ralph, you know, he handled that. He did it well. He did it for years. And I give me something else, God. Give me something easier. Yes, because I don't, that's more than what I want to give. You know, I'll give some money. I want to do, and this is what I want you to do. So I talked to my husband, and of course, you know, when you have a good man, they understand you, and they understand what makes you happy, and they complete you. So if I'm wavering, he's like, okay, you know, you can't go against God now. If God told you to do that, you can't do that. You can't. But and I'm like, no, I got to make sure. I got to get clarity. God, you got to let the wool be wet and then dry. You got to give me several confirmations. And then I was talking to my pastor, and he was like, what do you? He called me and said, what are you struggling with? And I said, I hate it when you do that. And I said, God has told me to do something I don't want to do. And he was like, Miss T, you better do it. You know, the same thing. So I finally, just like my calling into the ministry. And I told God, first of all, I didn't like the name. And if I can be real and transparent, because that's just how I am in the church too. I didn't like the name National Advancement for Colored People, because when I grew up, we were no longer colored. We were Black or African American, and I was proud of that. So I didn't like the name. Just like when he called me to preach. Well, I don't believe in women preachers. How are you going to call me to do something that I don't even believe in, God? I mean, I don't, you know, I didn't have nothing against them, but it wasn't for me. So how can you, what are you doing? How can I, what? So if you understand the kingdom and what God really was and who Jesus really was, and if you really follow Jesus, which is what Christianity is supposed to be based on, he was all about love. He was all about freedom. He was all about acceptance. He never hurt anybody. And when the people in authority did wrong, he overthrew the tables and he corrected them and he told them, bring it down, you are wrong. And that's why I was like, God, you're gonna have to make this work, because I mean, do I need to stop doing this and do that? And how am I gonna do this and have a full-time job? And then I gotta have some family time. I learned that a long time ago. You got to have balance. And then when am I going to exercise with all these meetings? And he was like, we can make it work. We're going to do this. So I had to accept that. That's why there's a mass exodus in the church, because you've got all these older Christians who were slave owners, and I'm just going to be real, and who do practice racism in the home and say negative words and do all of that, and then get out in front of friends and in public and put on another facade, and the children are sitting back like Kelly Ann's daughter did. That's not right. That's not who you are. That's, you know, that's why there's been a mass exodus. That's why I am so adamant about youth right now, because we have hurt them with our lies. We caused this rift by not being true and not being authentic and not being real and not really being like we said we were. Because Christianity means one thing for rich white people and something else for other people. And that's not how it's supposed to be. Christianity means you following Jesus and you're doing what he says, which is loving everybody. So when people, this girl told me, I didn't know you were the minister. I didn't know, God, I've been saying bad words. I'm like, no, you be you. I said, and that's the best compliment I could ever get. Because I never want you to be fake with me. And I never want you to say, oh, she's one of them. I never want to be a Pharisee. I never want to be, and if you know the Bible, those are the people who thought they knew what they were doing, and you had to do all these laws and these rules, but they didn't have love. And they're the ones that killed Jesus. And we're the ones that killing our youth by lying. So because I'm there and I've seen it, I can say that, and I want to just tell all of the youth, I am sorry for all of the things that we have done contradictory to hurt our youth. So I can make it work because it's what Jesus would do.
Yeah, and I was really interested in your perspective, just because, like, we do live in the Bible Belt. That is like a common, and Tennessee is the buckle of the Bible Belt. So it's like we're the heart of it, right? And
Supposed to be.
Yeah, and so you see these like negative interpretations and like very hateful things from people that I know have went to church every Sunday faithfully, will not miss a beat, and then turn around and look you in your face and say blatantly racist things, and then be like, but well, what's wrong? I don't understand. And so I just never understood how, like, if there's a church on every corner,
come on,
how are we acting like this, and how are you treating people so bad and like feeling justified in your behavior because of X, Y, and Z, but then go and pray to God like later on that night.
And thank God.
I'm not like super, I wouldn't say that I'm super religious, because I've never felt comfortable to open myself up to be in that type of environment. And so I wanted to know your perspective on that.
Yeah.
I think that type of dialogue is important to touch on because of where we're at and kind of the general religious viewpoints that people hold in this area.
And
so
generally,
thank you for like, that was vulnerable. Like I could see that was a really vulnerable thing for you to talk about. So like, I just want to say I appreciate you for like opening up to me and the people that are in this room and whoever else is going to see this later.
150,000 on here.
So
well, that's how we have to be. And if we want things to change, then we got to tell the truth, our truth. And that's my truth. If I'm going to say I'm a Christian and I love God, then I'm going to live that way. And you're going to see it at home, you're going to see it at work, and you're going to see it at church. And if I see you on the street, you're going to see it. So, I mean, that's what he wants. That's what he requires of me. And I couldn't say I'm a Christian and I love God and just sit back and watch this happen and do nothing. So.
Well, ladies, that was wonderful. I thoroughly
This
enjoyed
is like
this.
one
I
of
don't
my
want it to
favorites.
stop.
I'm telling you.
well, we can all get lunch or something sometime.
Yes, do it again. Do it again.
Side note, before we go to the call to action, which Alana, I'm going to let you do that.
Okay.
I have said, and I think it was last week I said it, I was talking to my brother and I was like, I just want to be a fly on the wall when these people wake up in hell. And they're like, I was a Christian. What am I doing here? And I just want to see. I just want to watch for like 5 minutes.
My husband and I have talked about that so many
When the whole
times.
congregation
Yes. And when they see the people, the homeless people,
Mhm,
and gay people,
mhm.
and all the people that they have persecuted and hurt in heaven, and they're down there in hell, burning up, I won't, and he probably won't let me see it, but I just want to look down there at them and say,
know.
I tried to tell you.
It's not allowed.
There might be a Zoom meeting.
We need a
No,
Zoom
I'm not gonna laugh at
watch
nobody.
party. I will.
I just want to see how many of my friends are down there. How many of them ended up, Lord? Whew, we had a good time. But I don't know if they make it to heaven though.
Oh my gosh. All right, so call to action. We always try to leave our folks here with something that they can do, because yes, this is good that they're tuning into this program and witnessing that wonderful conversation that you all had, but what can and do these folks need to be aware of, and do they need to be doing? Alana, hit us with the call to action.
So the calls to action are similar depending on, similar but different depending on where you are. So the first general thing that you should be doing is paying attention to what's going on locally, like what types of laws and regulations are being passed or not passed, just general, like these people that are your elected officials, they're your elected officials. So that means they work for you and are supposed to represent you, and their paychecks come from your tax dollars. So you need to be holding them accountable. And the only way to do that is to know what's going on. Secondly, more local in Johnson City, we as a collective, people that are on the same page, are trying to get an equity advisory board passed through the Johnson City Commission. It's been presented several times, officially and unofficially. And so show up to those city commission meetings. They're on what, Thursday?
Yes, the first and third.
Yeah, the first Thursday and the third Thursday every month at 6 o'clock. You can tune in via Zoom, or you can show up in person now. And it's in, for shortness, it's in the Johnson City Police Department building. They tell you it's like this whole fancy name. It's the police department. Go there, show your support. If you believe that we need to have accountability and, you know, conscious, like thoughtful diversity and like be intentional about, you know, having equitable and representative people, like, yeah, like staff and officials. I mean, you name it. We need more diversity across the board in Johnson City. And lastly, as Kat normally tells you guys, run for public office. Your voice matters, and your experience matters. Yeah, committees.
Yes.
Committees.
And if you have volunteer hours and you have the time and you feel the calling in your heart, please, these committees need some younger folks, because again, the time and the money of it being a volunteer position, it's unpaid. Like,
Right.
if you're young and you're grinding and you're working, or if you are older and you just don't have anything to fall back on, like, it could be a daunting task to say, well, I'm going to spend X amount of my time volunteering, but it's so worthwhile. And if you really can take a few hours out of your week or month to like contribute, it's so worth it.
Very good.
It is. Well, ladies, thank you all again. Everyone has been super excited about tonight's conversation. I know we were.
Yes,
They said and thank you for, this has been an hour and almost a half. We're 2 minutes shy of an hour and a half.
We was long-winded. I'm sorry,
We all
viewers.
are.
Hey, thanks for watching though.
Yeah.
Thanks for sticking with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
But thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next month. And we actually will be having our part 2 with Adam Dixon and Felipe Piuza.
All right.
And I know y'all still have plenty more to say. We might have to work up part 2 with this one as well. But thank you again, and remember to have these conversations with people in your lives. Y'all be easy.
Bye.
Bye.